welcome to today's webinar, how to test for injection and broken authentication risk from OWASP Top 10. Thank you for taking time out and join us here today. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Please check the internet connection first. I hope everyone can see and hear us. Please type a plus into the chat box in your control panel if everything is okay.
Well, the connection is fine. For those of you just joining us, welcome. Now, without further ado, let us introduce ourselves. I'm Milcho Hekimov, Chief Technology Officer at Quality House and a certified ethical hacker. Yuriy?
Milcho, please change the slide.
Yeah, again, sorry.
Okay, I'm Yuriy Bahno, as the tech lead at QATestLab. I have been in security testing for 2 years with a focus on the most challenging cyber risk threat. Today we will be looking at following. What are SQL injection and broken authentication risk? What do hackers gain from exploit them? Next, cyber attacks in practice, and finally, how user can strengthen their IT security against injection flaws and broken authentication. If you have any question during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your control panel. We will address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. Milcho, please.
Okay, I'll take on the injection part. So let's first start with some historical notes. Some of the most famous SQL injection attacks at Sony 2011. This really is one of the most famous SQL injection attacks ever, compromising 77 million user accounts. An attack against MySQL, MySQL.com actually was vulnerable to blind SQL injection due to flaws in implementation of their website. The attack against Sun Systems, also known as Oracle, again 2011, only tables and emails were dumped from their database, but no passwords were compromised. So all these three attacks are from 2011, but this doesn't mean that the vulnerability is gone. The types of injections that there are, injection flaws are to be found mainly in legacy code, but they are often found in SQL injection, in SQL, LDAP, NoSQL queries, OS commands, XML parsers, expression languages, and others. Today I will be talking about them and particularly about SQL injections, since they are by far the most common type of injection. So what is SQL? Let's start from here. Structured query language, or SQL, is a language used to communicate with the database. SQL statements are used to perform tasks such as update data on a database or retrieve data from the database. So, how to test and what is SQL injection first? SQL injection is one of the most common web hacking techniques. It consists of insertion or injection in SQL statements via web page input from client to application. SQL injection can result in exposed sensitive data from the database, modifying the database data, executing administration operations on the database, and in some cases to issue commands on the operating system. So How to test for SQL injection? There are two main ways. There are more ways than these two, but the two main ways are causing a syntax error or triggering time delays. There are two common main types of SQL injections. Those are blind and classic SQL injections. The classic SQL injection, this is the most easy to exploit type of SQL injection. It occurs when the attacker is able to use the same communication channel to launch the attack and gather the results. There are two common classic examples of classic SQL injections: error-based and union-based. Error-based SQL injection relies on error messages returned by the database server to obtain information about the structure of the query in the server. There are cases where the attacker can get enough information to enumerate an entire database. Union-based injections leverage the union operator to combine the results of select statements into a single result. In blind SQL injections, no data is transferred via the web application, and the attacker is not able to see the result of an attack. There are two common types of blind SQL injections. That's Boolean-based and time-based. Boolean-based SQL injection is a technique that relies on sending SQL query to the application, forcing it to return different results depending on whether the query returns true or false. Depending on the result, the attacker observes the content within the HTTP response and gets to know if the payload returned true or false, even though no data from the database is returned. Time-based SQL injection is a technique that relies on sending SQL query, which forces the database to wait for a specific amount of time before responding. So, I've prepared a little demo for our demonstration. We'll be using OWASP's DVWA, then vulnerable web application. This is an open source vulnerable application written in PHP, and it's using MySQL database. So I've prepared two videos to show you two different variations of the SQL injection. So as you can see, we're logged as administrator and the security level is set to low. We have opened the page of our target vulnerability, SQL injection. As you can see, our application is waiting for an input. When we provide a number, when we provide a number, the application iterates over the records in the database and returns the ID, first name, and surname of the registered users. We can try adding some special symbols like question mark, or even better, apostrophe and question mark. This will cause a syntax error at our MySQL server because the apostrophe closes the variable in the query, as you can see from the error message. Our next try will be to try and comment out the apostrophe that is breaking our query by adding two dashes at the end. A very common mistake is to forget adding a space after the command sign. As you can see, after we add the space, we can no longer have the syntax error, and we've got ourselves a query that we control. Now, between the semicolon and the comment, we can add our own query and make some fun stuff with the database, like getting the version. We can guess our query has two parameters because of the output where we get when adding a number. That's why when we get a correct syntax, we're getting the version of the MySQL server below. We can dump all the user surnames by adding or1 equals 1 to the query, as you can see. Next, we'll dump all the table names. Most of those should be internal for MySQL. But let's see. We can use the table name, which is a common storage for those in the information from the information schema. Again, we're following the same syntax. As you can see, we got all the columns. And yeah, and let's take now. Let's dump all the columns also, because we now got the table names. Now we need the columns. That's the column name from and no again, because see what's going on. Yeah, from information schema. Now we've got all the columns, and we can combine the results from both queries. So we can see the tables and the columns. We need this to know which column is belongs to which table. Okay. Now that we got the tables and the columns, we want to get the usernames and the passwords. Again, we should follow the same syntax that we got till now. It's username, password from users, and when we hit submit, you can see all the names and the passwords are right there. So as you can see, the passwords are in hashed variant, so that's a problem for maybe another session. For our next example, let's set our security level to medium and go to the same SQL injection application again. We can check what will happen when we submit a semicolon. And as you can see, the error message is a bit different. The application is escaping our symbol. Let's try and add the comment. We used in the last demo the same comment. You can see we are getting a syntax error again, and this is exactly the same application but with different implementation. We can try adding again a special symbol like question mark. You can see it's again 1, 2, 3. It's still iterating again. Let's try to add this question mark, and we can see that this time the application is returning an error. Last time we got no error, but this time we're getting. It seems we don't need our apostrophe to trigger the error. Let's try adding union select body to verify we're correct. As you can see in the error message, the union select body is missing. This is good for us since now we can start enumerating the amount of operators we need to add in that union. Let's try with no. Okay, we're getting that it's different amount of different number of columns. Let's add another no. Seems like we need to add 2 operators. Using the new syntax, we can dump the same columns as we did in the first demo. As you can see, again, dumping the version, still following the same syntax. The version is visible. Now let's see the columns and the tables. Okay. And you can see all the columns and all the tables from these applications. Here we still got users. We got again password from the same table, users. And let's dump again all the users and the passwords. Again, follow the same syntax since we noticed that this is the correct syntax for making this application return everything we want. And again, the passwords again are in hashed variant. It's good to save successful query and the results from it in order to try and crack the passwords in later phase. But if you're conducting a penetration test for external company, don't do that. It might be illegal to get information from a database that you're not supposed to get. For this is only for our test right now. Okay. I would like to recommend 2 really useful tools to automate the process of testing. They're really powerful and can be used in a variety of ways. Those are SQL Map and SQL Ninja. SQL Map is an open source penetration testing tool that automates the process of detecting and exploiting SQL injection flaws and taking over database servers. SQL Map supports the most used database servers and supports all 6 types of injections: Boolean-based blind, time-based blind injections, error-based injections, union query-based, stacked queries, and out-of-band injections. SQL Ninja's goal, as now we're talking about SQL Ninja, the other tool, its goal is to exploit SQL injection vulnerabilities in web applications that use Microsoft SQL as a backend. And preventing, something about prevention. Preventing injection requires keeping data separate from commands and queries. According to OWASP, the preferred option is to use a safe API, which avoids the use of the interpreter entirely, and or provides a parameterized interface. Using positive or whitelist server-side input validation can also lower the risk of SQL injections. There are a lot of ways to exploit SQL injections, and we have covered the most basic ones. On the injections topic, there are also few more types of injections, except the SQL, that we don't have the time to cover. However, I would like to recommend exploring OWASP's website and Portswigger WebSec Academy in order to find more resources and get hands-on experience in their labs. And that's it. Yuriy?
Thank you, Milcho. One moment, I will share my screen with presentation and we can start.
Yeah, if you have any questions, just write them in the Q&A part and we'll try to answer them.
Okay. Milcho, can you see my presentation?
Yeah.
Oh, super. Okay, let's go. Well, let's move on the second cyber risk, broken authentication. Maybe you are familiar with it. If you are using public Wi-Fi and suddenly someone starts performing action on your behalf, congrats, you have been hacked. In this case, facing authentication-related attack. In this part, I want to introduce two attack vectors. First vector, brute force, and second vector, session hijacking. Now let's turn us to point one, brute force. A brute force attack is an attempt to discover a password by systematically typing every possible combination of letters, numbers, and symbols until you discover the one correct combination that works. Brute force attack put user account at risk and flag a site with necessary traffic. When selection data, an attacker can use some previously merged database as an exciting one, or generate data through tools. So suppose we have two files with a huge list of PPI logins and password. Exam, you can take a list of most popular password according to statistic, like this I have included in the slide, or use database of leaked password. You can find a file, call it RawQ, on the web, which include millions of them. One of the tools for carrying out brute force attack is BoobSuite. I prepare a video exam. Let's take a closer look at. I will use the test app is BWAP and BoobSuite. First, set up a proxy in BoobSuite. Open the proxy tab, then go to the option. We can add, edit, and remove proxy. Let's add a proxy. Choose address. After that, enter a new proxy port. Okay. Then step up a proxy in a browser. Go to browser setting and manual set the proxy the same as in the BoobSuite. Manual setup manual proxy. Check correct top. Okay. One moment. Sorry. If the application under test uses HTTPS, then you also need to install a certificate. For Firefox, go to http://boob and download the certificate. After, we can add this certificate in the browser. In my opinion, Firefox fits better for security testing because it doesn't have many built-in filters as Chrome does. Okay, go to the web application and enter any data in the authorization form. Go to the boop suite, proxy, and enable the interception. Now send requests for authorization in the web app. Our request is displayed in boop suite. We send this request to intruder. Now go to intruder tab. Then specify host and port of our web application in the target tab. Go to position. We see that this instrument automatically marks the variable, but we don't need all the variable. Clear all and mark this. We'll be walking through login and password. After we need to choose the cluster bomb attack type in dropdown. Go to payloads tab. Here we should upload data for our variables, which are login and password. For payloads, for the payload type, we set a simple list. And now in the payloads options, we add a list of logins for the variable one. For clarity, we add the correct login to the payload. Top correct login. Okay. And now we add a list of password for the variable 2. And for clarity, we add the correct password too. Add correct password. You can add either one at a time or upload them as a file. One more thing before we start, to help Boot Suite understand if there is a match, let's go to, let's add a marker. Go to options and find grab match. If login fail, you get a message on the authorization page. Copy a part of it and insert it into grab match. So all settings are ready and we can proceed. Click the Start Attack button on the top of the page. In process, I need 2 seconds. Here we go. Great. US can see here we have a total number of combination, login, password, and status. I like to draw your attention how to status code works. The code 200 means that our attempt was successful. It doesn't mean that we go a match. When it's a real project, there would be the code 300 and indicates the redirect to the cabinet. And the results of our markers is also displayed. Okay, next. There are some things to consider if you want to protect the system for brute force. Where possible, implement multi-factor authorization to prevent automated attack, limit or increasingly delay failed login attempt, implement weekly password checkers, and the last but not least, alert password links, complex and rotation policies with NIST guideline. You can see in the section 511. And we go next, vectors. So now we come to the next point, which is another vector attack, session hijacking. Session hijacking means stealing the user session to gain access to their personal data. First, let's take a look at how session management works in general. Put simple, how a website determines that is you and not anyone else. So I won't disclose your confidential information to other people. This brings me to the next slide. These pictures show how users recognition would work with their own session management or session cookies. Let's say I am a user whose name is Tom. I enter a login and password after sending a query through a post request, and the website server receive my authentication request. The server verify my data. If my data is in the system, the server say, "Hi Tom." It send me to code 200, which means I have been authorized. Okay, then I would like to view my data on my on the profile page. For example, I did something. The server detect my intention by getting a request. I would like to visit this page. The server starts verify my profile because it hasn't received any configuration that I am really me. Now that the server is done trying to understand who I am, it has displayed to me a error message instead of the requested page. It say, "Who are you?" At this point, you would probably say that is super inconvenient to enter your credential on each website page. Yep, that's why there is such a thing as session. It stores all data about me and doesn't force me to send my login details every time when I need to view a web page. Now let's look at how it works with the session. These pictures show how user recognition works with a session and session cookie. Tom is here again. He is entering his password and login for authorization like the first time. The server verifies Tom's data. If his data is in the system, it creates a unique session for him, adding it to the database. Then the server sent a response to him with "Hi Tom" message, code 200, and also a unique ID. The session ID stores your credential. The server will ask you for them when you decided to make any request on the site. Now, with each following request, he should just provide a session ID along with a session request. The system will understand that he is a verified user. Let's also take a look how the system will respond to our freezer request. This pictures shows the transfer of our request along with session ID to ensure the system that I am a verified user. Our friend Tom here is again. We make a request staging that will be like to profile page. What you will notice is that this time we also pass the session ID, which contains our credentials to identify us as user to the site. The server checks my data in the database. If my data is in the system, it says, "Hi Tom, give me to the 200 code," which means that I am the true owner of my account. Okay, now let's see how a hacker can use the session ID to steal your personal information. Here is a really interesting part. Tom is here again, sending a request to the server. Then the server is processing his data and generates the session ID. And Insidious Hacker intercept the session using tools like Ethercap. This hacker inserts the session ID that he intercepted in his browser, refreshes the page, and finds himself under the account of the user he intercepted. Let's now take a look at the next slide. I prepare a video exam. Here's exams. User cookies can be updated in a variety of ways, like Ethercap interception application, and we can also get cookies when using XSS injection. Let's say that we have already received user's cookie in one of the way. What should be next? We register on the web site and log in into the user account. We log in as BIP, open the DevTools in the browser and go to Storage tab. Then cookie and select the site we need. In the value section, change the cookies and reload the page and check at which user account we are logged in. Refresh page. Okay, now we are logged in as admin. If it's possible to get access to the admin page this way, then a lot of damage can be done. Let's move on to how to protect ourselves in this case. Taking session data. First, set the session expiration data. Now, even if a hacker somehow finds your session, it won't be valid on once the time expires. Second, bind the user IP checkers to the session. Be careful with it, since the IP may differ once of the user choose a different device, or there is a change in the dynamic IP. In this case, the user will have a login to offer. Second steps, security session IDs. Session ID must be unique and random, so you don't have to share the same session with a bunch of intruder. And second, session ID must be protected with security and HTTP only flags. This attribute hide all the information on your cookies and session when a hacker try to intercept your request. And last step involves storage session protection. All session should be stored on the server side. They are much more vulnerable on the front end. Secondly, destroy the session when the user log out. I also want to remind you, don't implement user data validation only in the front end. The user can easily bypass it by sending data directly through request instead of the user interface. Okay. Well, I have covered the points that I want to prevent today. I will pause here to see if we have any question.
Well, I'm looking at some of the questions, and I'll try to answer some of them while you gather your questions. The first one, among SQL map, tool for automated SQL injection, and manual SQL injection, what method is better to choose for the primary analysis? So usually the manual testing is the best way in security, but if you have access to the code, white box testing approach can have really high success rate. Also, some fuzzers can also help. How can someone become a certified ethical hacker? This is the second question. Well, certified ethical hacker is actually a name of a really big course. You can apply for it and get the certificate whenever there is a course or organized in your town or nearby. Must I be in the same network as the SQL server for the injection to work? No, you just need to have access to the web application, which is being connected to the SQL server. So most of the times, just network connection internet connection is enough. Can you recommend the OSCP course? Is it worth it? Definitely yes, it's worth it. Apart from OSCP, offensive security have a lot of courses, and right now, by the way, I'm still going through one of their courses. It's OSWE, that's Offensive Security Web Expert, and it's great. It's a pretty hard course. The fifth question, hi guys, is there a statistic how many apps can be broken using SQL Ninja and SQL Map? I mean, only old apps can be broken in this way, or also the new apps. So the SQL injection problems are starting when there is something wrong with the implementation. It's or the code is pretty old and the version of the database hasn't been updated. There are a lot of symptoms that can be there. So I don't know if there is a statistic about the tools, but not only the old apps can be broken and not only the new apps. So every app can be broken, it just needs a flow in the implementation. Sixth question is, thanks, about injections, and what about PostgreSQL, Oracle databases, NoSQL variants? Do the apps with these DB still have security problems? Yes, again, and the problem is mainly in the implementation of this thing, of the queries, and not that big in the database. So if the database version is old, there is a lot of chances that there can be a vulnerability too in the way that the database server is handling the requests. So, but yeah, every database can be broken if the implementation is bad. And the last one, when you get a task to test a new web app on security issues, how you start testing on injections? So this is pretty good question, by the way. There are a lot of ways. The first thing you need to do is to see where to identify the places where an SQL query is being built. Again, if you have access to the code, this helps a lot. You can see every query there, and that makes really easier the attack. But if you don't have the access to the code, just fuzzing some fields or just thinking out how can this application be built, then you can go to the answer, how can it be broken? Example of real bugs you found related to these vulnerabilities. So I cannot disclose the website where I found this thing. I can say only it was a big website for buying and selling cars, and there I identified really simple SQL injection. It was really close to the SQL injections that we saw here. I wrote them an email, and few days after that, the bug was fixed. So yeah, I guess those are the questions. Yuriy?
Yes, I have some questions. First questions, what do you think about Hydra tools for brute forcing? I found it's very useful for brute force, brute only tasks. Okay, interesting question. Hydra is a good tool for brute force, but I use Boop Suite because Boop has a user-friendly interface, but Hydra I sometimes use and Hydra. Next question, can you tell me more about Boop Suite? It's a wonderful question. It's very cool security testing tool. They have many different tools for security testing, but to answer this question, I need another webinar and more time for explaining it. Yes, next question. Is encrypting the password enough to secure your site? It's not always enough to encrypt the data. You need to watch a specific project and sometimes you need to using better SSL certificate and so on. What case you test each time you check on broken authentication vulnerable? I check for sure brute force and session hijacking, and sometimes I work with hash password. I use rainbow tables and so on. I check for sure at brute force and session hijacking. What case you test each time? Okay. Script. One moment. What's the most common hack? I cannot tell you which problem is the most common, but I can tell you why. Due to incorrect configuration of product components, that is due to human factor, and I have last questions. You have been hacked. This might be, but I don't remember or may not even know about it. I know that my personal email was leaked from once resource, and okay, that's finished for my question. Okay, great. One moment. Okay, great. I had a terrific time at this webinar. If you have a question later, feel free to reach out to us on the email on this slide. For this concludes our webinar. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you, Milcho, for your presentation and experience.
Thank you all too. Thank you to QATestLab for making this webinar really awesome. Thank you all for joining, and stay curious and don't get hacked.